Welcome back to Fight Capital, where we step into the ring of combat sports business. I'm your host, Ryan Rappaport. Today, I'm excited to have a chat with Khai Wu. Khai is a professional MMA athlete known for his significant impact in growing Taiwan's MMA scene and for being the lead trainer to Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. We're going to explore his journey from overcoming bullying through martial arts to his exciting debut in the Professional Fighters League last week, and how he's working to reshape the future of MMA in Asia and beyond. Thanks for being here, Khai. How are you and where are you joining from today?
Thank you for having me. I am currently in California. I will be on the go sometime soon. I think tomorrow, actually. But yeah, it's been great.
I know you were just over here on the East Coast and they got you going all over the place. But
Yeah.
it's super interesting to me going back to listening to you at Media Day and then being able to watch you last Friday. It seems like you have just this really kind of like love and passion for martial arts. And I know you'd shared before coming from into martial arts at a young age, influenced by your brother-in-law, Dave Camarillo. How did that really kind of shape your early exposure and your approach to MMA now and your decision to turn professional?
Well, I think his goal was just to get me to train more, if that makes sense. It was never about turning pro. It was just do jujitsu, do martial arts, have fun with it. And I think I'm the one that kind of started pushing that competitive edge and really trying to see how far I could take it. And then next thing you know, I was fast forward years later, I'm fighting for PFL last Friday. It didn't go my way, but one thing I'm always glad after fights is I'm unscathed. Like there's no injuries. I could get right back into the gym. Those are the best kind of losses if that makes sense. If you were to lose a fight, it's you come out unscathed and what you need to work on as opposed to a fight where I've had a fight where I fractured my shin and I lost, and then you got a fractured shin for like the next couple months. You got to recover, so it just absolutely sucks. So this one was a lot better in the sense that it's like I'm uninjured. I could get right back to the gym, work on certain things, and it wasn't like a complete one-sided fight. It's not like I was completely outclassed and I shouldn't belong in there. It was like, there's glimpses of one thing I don't want to do, and I've done in the past is you look at only what's wrong with how the fight went wrong, only the negatives, and the problem is you just focus on those things and you throw away everything that's worked. And I've kind of learned from that. So we kind of look at the pros and cons, and then we just kind of go from there. But yeah, I mean, it was exciting, and I think growing up with my brother-in-law, who's kind of been there and done that, he was the one that also gave me a lot of these insights. So that's kind of how training with him led me to how I am today, and how my I would say my skills are influenced.
Dave's obviously a legend of the sport. And I will say that was my big takeaway too when I saw you getting interviewed. I think it was maybe the next day or whatnot. I was like, man, he did not take a whole lot of damage. And it was a competitive fight. Not to uh, speak down to Phil. I mean, Phil did a really amazing job, was obviously able to implement his game
Yeah,
plan, but
definitely.
you definitely came out for as long of a match that was, you guys definitely came out on the good side of it as well. So glad to hear that you're rebounding there. One of the things that kind of really caught me as well is just talking about the significance for you as someone who's fought in Taiwan multiple times. Could you just describe some of that impact of fighting there and what that means for you to compete?
Yeah, I think the cool thing is the market over there is so untapped. It's like you've had shows. I want to give all the respect and props to everyone that's thrown a show out there, all the promoters, but no one has really solidified or captured the market in that sense. And I think the biggest issue with that is you need the money, the branding. Maybe one promoter has the branding, but he doesn't have the matchmaking. Maybe one has the matchmaking, but he doesn't understand promoting. So you're kind of missing all these pieces. And the only way you either do it is with a fighter. Like I run my own organization, like all these big name MMA guys are doing, like Anthony Pettis, Uriah Faber. So I either do something like that, but the thing is, you need the money now. Or what I could do is, since I'm still fighting, just reach out to PFL. A rising tide raises all ships. I have no problem with reaching out to them, connecting some dots. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest demise of MMA in Asia too has been opportunists. They see this and they're like, look, I have my hands in this industry. I don't want anyone to do anything with it. I don't want anyone to touch it. So they don't share the wealth, and they become, instead of king of the jungle, it's more like king of this little section. You know what I mean? And they're okay with living that. But the problem is you're not creating an ecosystem. And so for me, I'm really hoping to. I'm very confident in not just business, but the potential there is in Asia because I've seen it firsthand. I would love to sit down with PFL, run them through some like easy numbers and growth, and I just love to walk them through it without even. I wasn't joking when I said I wasn't looking to take a cent. I'm willing to just do this out of the bottom of my heart because at the end of the day, when you're done fighting, like people always say this, like who is the 1984 Olympics gold medalist? Like no one remembers, but it's also who leaves the most impact. I don't want to just be a fighter that everyone. There's always going to be someone better. Like people are already talking about Kamaru Usman, for example. Like he's done. It's like man, he did so much, and then people just write him off because he gets these ridiculous tough opponents and a couple tough losses. So I don't know. I just kind of see that as a real martial artist in today's age. Back in the day, if you modernize it and put them today, how would they do things? And what they would do is they would, when they're done competing, they would have left a legacy or passed down their lessons and knowledge to the point where what is that good old saying? They said if a leader, if his work is truly done, everyone thinks they did it themselves. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I think that's kind of like the mindset too. It's I don't need a pat on the back. I just want to be able to see my um, teammates and people that I know that are very talented in Asia shine. I'd love to see the market. Again, it doesn't have. I don't need a pat on the back for it. I would just love to see the market flourish. It has its own ecosystem, and when I go back in the future, I'm like, oh man, there's a fight this weekend. There's a fight that weekend. I just think it's really cool to see that.
Yeah, I think it would almost surprise most people to hear that too. I mean, could you think of martial arts and Asian culture just being such a prevalent part of it? And to
Yeah.
hear that, I know the PFL is looking there. They just had that announcement with Dafabet. Obviously, you have one there. I've even talked with the Brave CF
Yeah.
CEO. They're looking at it from like the Western Asian side, like Bangladesh and
Mhm.
all Pakistan, all those areas. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there. And I know that you've had some important figures in your life, like Rocky Lee from the UFC, Jeff Wong from One, and kind of
Yep.
them helping developing the scene there as well. How they've influenced your career and what you're looking to do with the next generation of athletes there.
Well, first and foremost, I wasn't born there, so there's its pros and cons. When you're born there, like for example, Rocky Lee, he didn't get as much love as I think he should have gotten, and the reason why is just because it's very weird, but the culture there sometimes, not all the time, but they don't like to support their own, and I'm not sure why. I think it has to do with like outside perspective, like if you could send your kid overseas to America, then that means you must have a wealthy background and you come from a good background and you have a good, foundation. So I think when I went over there and I was able to speak English and Mandarin, they're like, "Who's this kid? He must be well off and wealthy family, good structure." And I'm just like, that's kind of not what happened. I did the opposite. I came to Taiwan to learn. The cost of living was cheaper, and I came here with my mom to learn Mandarin. I was trying to learn Mandarin and understand the culture a bit more. So I think it's very interesting. But if you want anything done, you got to do it yourself, and you have to kind of changed their thought process. So I started going over there and I was like hype about everything that is really cool in Taiwan. And they're like, wow, you're kind of making this cool, like you're making the traditional stuff here that like to them, they're like, this isn't a big deal to us. But I was like, man, it's a big deal to me because I come back. And I think, when the grass is always greener, but you never know it is until you go to the other side. And I think when people started seeing that, they're like, you know what, you're right. You start creating a kind of like a like a culture. You try to create this new culture for MMA where it's a little different, but at the same time, I always pay my respects. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Rocky Lees, the Jeff. Jeff helps do some of the matchmaking for WOTD, the organization I fought for, and man, he's amazing. Like the fact that he had his story. He had a little documentary come out about him, and Rocky Lee being the first Taiwanese guy to ever make it to the UFC. Granted, that's no joke. The fact that he was able to even make it there because it's not developed over there. So props to them. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them, and I always pay my respect. So I think now I know Jeff. I speak with Jeff a little bit more. I only see Rocky on occasions, but now Jeff is like, hey, you're the younger guy. We're passing on the torch to you now. So I find a little bit of a I find a lot of respect for him for saying that, and I find a little bit of stress on my shoulders. I'm like, man, I got to carry on the torch. And a lot of guys over there, like I keep saying, they're way more talented than I am. They just don't have that spotlight. They don't understand the business side of things. Fighting is no longer a sport; it's a business. If you're not good at that side of things, you're going to get the short end of the stick. So you have to be well-rounded everywhere, not just good at fighting, but at the same time, you got to know what promoters want. So I think the goal eventually is to continue to build my career through PFL and get a little bit more of the name in the headlines, get more people recognizing me, and then eventually I think we knock on some doors in Asia. And it's not just Taiwan. That's just the only market that I'm confident. If you gave me PFL, if they sat down with me right now, I'm like, here's how we can execute things. But all the other markets, I'd love to do Mandarin commentary or translations for them in the future. Something, be involved with the martial arts scene somehow. Just open up new doors.
That's really cool. I mean, it seems like you're also proliferating American fight culture there as well, right? And
Yeah.
there's definitely that kind of cross pollination between East versus West, and the cultures kind of absorbing each other. But it seems like you've just had like a really good impact there in the MMA scene, including like giving TEDx talks and
Yeah.
being recognized by fans all over the place. I mean, how do you like view your role in promoting the scene there, both as an athlete and a public figure?
The problem is, I feel like the Conor McGregor act is not meant for me. Like I could not walk around strutting with the suit on with um like just this attitude. I don't think they like it either. They like Floyd Mayweather and Conor because they're not Taiwanese.
Hmm.
Now, if they're Taiwanese, then they try to act like that. It just wouldn't fly. And on top of that, I think what we lack a lot in the martial arts community over there is just kind of not just being humble but open minded. Everyone's like still stuck in the old ways of like my style versus his style or my gym versus his gym. So for me, it's more like be humble, say hi to everyone, and just be yourself. It's very cliche, but a lot of people tend to start getting yes men in their corners or people telling them they're this or that, and then they start getting dragged in different directions and they become something that they're unrecognizable. At the end of the day, I look at myself and I'm still like still the same guy. Skills, definitely try to always prove on them. Personality and humility, just keep it the same basically. Yeah, you mature up a little bit, and you make better decisions. You have some deals that don't go your way and fights that don't go your way, but again, you just kind of learn from it, and you hope to teach the people that you work with what not to do and lessons to learn from you. You're like, hey, I slipped and fell and I cut myself, so you don't have to. Now it's just up to these guys to listen. But yeah, it's kind of bizarre when you do bring it up. When I talk to people, they're like, "Hey, you get recognized in Taiwan," or some people still message me like, "Hey, we saw a poster of you or a video of you in Taiwan." I'm like, "Yeah, that's cool. Like, send it all my way." Like, I think it's awesome. But even in America, in the Asian American communities, where I run into someone, they're like, "Hey, you're Khai, right? You fight. You're an MMA fighter from Taiwan." I'm like, this is still so bizarre, but I get just as excited as they do, if that makes sense. Like they're like, "Hey, can we get a photo?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude." Like it just excites me. So it's still very bizarre to kind of be in that position, but at the same time, I'm still extremely grateful. I'm extremely just the fact that I'm able to be one with the people. Mike Tyson said a great quote, and I kind of stick by this. Mike Tyson said, he's like, "Hey," it's not a diss to Floyd or anything, but I don't know if you ever saw that video where he was like, being a champion of the people, it means you can take your kids to school. Like, he needs
Hmm.
bodyguards and this and that. I think there's a little bit of lost, like, there's some lost translation there, but I still agree when, remember Muhammad Ali back in the day, he was running and there's people behind him and there's no security. That's kind of how I envision like the martial arts community in Taiwan. Like, I don't want it to be all of a sudden like this guy is way too big for everyone when it's the people that I entertain. They're the ones that, put me on this pedestal. I didn't ask. Like, I just worked really hard, and then my personality caught on. They liked it for whatever reason, just being myself. They loved it, and then they ended up, started recognizing me as like a martial arts fighter, MMA fighter, pro MMA fighter, and they made me a bigger deal than I actually think I am. So because the people are the ones that gave me that, ability and whatnot, recognition, if you will. I want to stay humble. I don't want to change things up. So that's kind of where it is. So yeah, it's still really extremely weird. Even like really funny. I was out with my mom. This is like a funny story I tell people sometimes. I was out with my mom. I just woke up. She wanted to grab breakfast, and then I was like, "Yeah, give me a second. I got to change." She's like, "No one's gonna recognize you. Just throw whatever on." So I threw on this tank top, and it was just like this plain white tank top. Walk downstairs, and then we go inside this restaurant, and it's like this 5-star restaurant. I think my mom just wanted to wander in there. The person ended up recognizing me, the manager, I think, and he's like, "Come eat with us for free." So my mom and I, obviously, we get kind of like, you don't turn something like that down, especially when they're being so polite. So we ended up sitting there, and my mom's all dressed because she's going to work, and I'm just in a top, just sitting there. Like, it's ridiculous. And then they're like, "Hey, can we get a photo?" I'm like, "Yeah, do you guys have any shirts? Like, can I just throw on a shirt?" They're like, "No, no, no, don't worry about it." It's just ridiculous. And even when we go home, I tell my mom, like, "See, I can't just wake up with like bedhead now and just go do whatever. It's not the same." And she couldn't even believe it herself. She was like, "Wow, this is really, I can't believe it. How did they even recognize you?" I was like, "I don't even know." During COVID, I went back this year during February. They still mask up over there. So I had a mask on, and someone recognized me too. And I don't even know how, but it's just very bizarre. So I started telling my teammates and my parents, I'm like, "Look, you know, it's not that I don't want to be myself out in public now. It's more like, hey, there's a sense of privacy, like my personal relationships and whatever. It got to that point where I'm like, hey, someone took a photo of me as they're driving by, and they sent it to me. They're like, "Is this you?" And I'm like, "Oh, geez, this is kind of weird." So I tell my parents, you never know, like, granted, this isn't, Taiwan is very safe. It's not like America where you have these, extremely weird stalker cases and whatnot. And I'm a guy; it's a little bit different. But there's still people like my sisters or my nieces and nephews that, I just want to take extra precaution. But it's not because I'm afraid of being myself. It's just more like there is still that boundary of, you keep your personal life more personal. But yeah, it's extremely weird.
Well, you touched on something too. I mean, like, not everyone. The Conor McGregor thing is, I think, played out way too much, and that's not a diss on Conor either. But I think one of the reasons why people across the world gravitate towards combat sports is there is a level of authenticity, and even
Mhm.
when people are trash talking you like here, and you're like, I don't know if that's actually authentic, and someone who probably knows the game is a lot of time you think it's self promotion. Other times it's not, but it's funny. I guess that's kind of why Merriam-Webber's word of the year this year was authentic and authenticity. And so, I mean, it's really, I use it too much, but I think it just kind of comes with the territory here because people know and understand who people are. And with access to social media these days, they're getting the real view of you, and you can put on a farce and you can spend a lot of time and effort to do that, but with the real people gravitate towards that, which I'm sure that has something to do with it. And probably why the PFL is looking at you as like a future expansion opportunity. And as because you've been working with them recently, have you seen kind of any unique opportunities for their league as it compares to other ones? And do you think this is going to align any more with your kind of career goals, possibly including business ventures with them?
Yeah, well, so I signed um, I don't know how much detail I could go into it, but I signed a pretty interesting, deal with them, like a 3-fight deal or something like that. But there's other stuff in there that um, they brought up, I brought up. We met each other in the middle, and it wasn't just about pay, but it's about like how can we. What's fun? It's really funny. I want to touch on this too. Is people thought I got signed because of the Mark thing, but it's really funny because I'm like, how could he help PFL? Like, what am I going to do? Tell Mark, hey, come to the fights. Maybe he does one time and that generates headlines for one fight, but that's it. You know what I mean? Realistically, what could they do? And if you look at a lot of top Asian fighters, they don't necessarily speak English. and they're really good, but a lot of them are signed to, UFC. You know what I mean? So realistically, who's someone out there right now that they could sign that they could really help, especially getting into a market? Majority of the fighters are Chinese. That market is really tough to penetrate. If someone already took it over, like if it was so easy, the UFC would have already been there. But they just canceled their December one, and they're not even doing it. So, and also I do business out there too. My mom does. It's not the same as like any other market out there. It's a whole nother planet. So for them, I think they're looking at smaller Asian uh, places to kind of start. And I've shown that I could sell out, like, the gymnasiums. I've headlined 4 or 5 times in Asia, so I think there was some interest there, and they caught word of, I guess my name got passed around in that Asian MMA circle for a little bit. So even like other promotions such as One reached out for express interest, and they're great. I met Chatri and spoke with him. It was really cool opportunities. But I think one thing that Lauren did really well, which is who I spoke with.
Lauren Mack.
Yeah, Lauren. Yeah, he reached out and just kind of touched on some things, and he was like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And it was business talk that I'm pretty sure it's still ongoing, so I don't want to say anything, but I think it was really interesting, and I do see certain potentials with PFL that I don't think a lot of, like the whole Bellator thing. Like, who saw that coming? I didn't see that coming because I started the conversations with them, I think last year. We didn't even officially sign until of this summer, but I started talking to them last year, and I didn't know anything that was going on. But the thing I liked about the PFL was, they're growing. They're growing. They're doing great. I like to be instead of be a part of someone's story. I like helping build things from the ground up, if you will. It's still early enough where I'm like, I think I could do more of a dent here than be a part of another organization and fight a couple times. And PFL was actually really interesting in the conversations, so I think that's why. And the fact that they were interested in building all these markets. And at first, you can't help but wonder, you're like, is this, I had a chat with Pete Murray, and I was like, are you guys just all talk? And then you see them do PFL Australia, PFL Europe. They have the Africa going on, and they signed Francis. And I'm like, yeah, they're not playing around. So there's definitely an opportunity in there somewhere to do something down the line. And I think it's just, the problem with me is time. I just hate the waiting game, but as you know, it's kind of like that. And like you were saying about the whole authenticity, I think PFL is pretty authentic. Their checks clear. They have so many $1 million champions. Like, if they weren't authentic, some would have came up by now. And to touch on that too, like, either you put on an act and people see through that act, or you put on that act and it drains you because you're putting on this act so long, you eventually just break down. I think those are the two options, and I think so far with what you see with PFL is, it's not an act. I think Don Davis, I met him at the New York event. Great guy, chatted. I love the way he talks. And even from the company people themselves, like, I chatted with a couple of them. They're like, yeah, he's great. Behind the scenes, he's great. In public, they say he's great. So it just kind of lines up with what everyone's saying. So I definitely think there's some interesting stuff in the works with PFL. And also on top of that, I feel like there's this whole world for the MMA media, such as yourself and all these other people. I'm like, man, you guys got to go, instead of just East Coast and West Coast, you guys got to go to Asia and start traveling. Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I just love seeing everyone kind of together when a plan works.
Yeah, well, Lauren Mack obviously has a great bead on the Asian market, and so I'm glad that
Yeah.
that's where those conversations start. And I'm a huge fan of him and just kind of
Yeah.
following what he's doing. Obviously, what they've been able to build hype wise, but it just seems like, and for me personally too, there's so much going on around the world, but the Asian scene just seems like it's there. And I know what you're saying, because like you referenced with the Apex, with now the UFC card they're having at the
Mhm.
Apex, and I know that their PI there, the Performance Institute, it's not gone smoothly as well. But that just kind of speaks to the market. It is a cultural and business difference. But like you were saying, I had Liz Carmouche on earlier this week,
Mm.
and she's Bellator flyweight champ, and she was stoked. I mean, like, she loves Scott Coker. I mean, Scott Coker did her great at the years of Bellator. Like, but even she was like, she thought 301 was a joke. She like wasn't sure it was happening, and she's pumped to be a part of the PFL because I think there's definitely a wave going there. Are they the UFC? No, but they are a differentiated product. And like you're saying, they're pulling in high profile people. They're
Yep.
pulling in the right people in the right markets. But it's the Mark Zuckerberg thing, just to touch on that, because you train with high profile people like that. In my opinion, as a fan, Dave Camarillo is one of those people. I would geek out over Dave over Zuck any day, and that's not an insult to him. But
Sure.
how is that experience working with him? Is that affecting like any of your business approach or MMA approach, and is it really helping you bring any type of broader understanding outside of the traditional sports circles?
Yeah, well, I think just by being attached to his name, like you get a lot more traffic. But at the same time, it's like I think it's cool that Mark himself is like, hey, let's do that. Let's do a video, you and I training together, and it was just really cool that he gave me that spotlight and shouted me out. That I think September of last year, and it's just well, there's pros and cons. It puts a lot of target on you. Like everyone all of a sudden wants to fight me now, and it's funny because I'm like, hey, you guys turned me down before the Mark gig, and now after, you guys are all of a sudden saying I'm ducking you, and in reality, you didn't even bat an eye. So I think it's funny. And it's just I keep referencing that John Wick thing because Dave, my brother, he worked on the John Wick film, and it's just funny because I remember watching John Wick 1 with my dad in like 2012, 2013 or something like that. And I'm like, man, how funny is it? Like that movie was so good, but he has a target on his back. I'm like, I kind of feel like that now. Like there's like this bounty. But I think going back to Mark, I think it's really cool that he was able to kind of do that. And again, I'm not like a world champion. I'm not someone special. It's just the fact that I think this speaks very highly of like him, his character. Like he cares about the people he surrounds himself with or that is around him. So the fact that he gave me a little shout out like that, I think it was huge. And then terms of business, just chatting with him every now and then on the mat, just being inspired. I seen him drop so many big products like the Meta Ray Bans, the Oculus, and then the Threads thing. It's just like, man, what aren't you doing? So it makes me want to do a little bit more in the business realm with myself. Not saying he's giving me like some insiders, because when we train, I keep it very professional, but at the same time, I think just being surrounded by someone like that. I mean, I got to train with Volkanovski too. When you train with someone like that, you're like, dude, he's like shorter than me. And he's beating guys like Max Holloway. Like you can't help but be inspired when you're around greatness. And there's two things. People are either envious or jealous of these people, and they're like, "Man, look at this guy! Like he's nothing. I mean, he got everything handed to him." Or you look at it as, "Wow, he's an opportunist. He takes every opportunity he gets, not in a bad way, in a good way. He makes the most out of everything." And when you look at Volk, I'm like, it's not like he's super big or strong or anything. It's just like, man, he's like 5'6". I remember standing next to him. I remember he was shorter than me. And I was like, geez, how is this possible that he is the great top one or two pound for pound greatest in the world, and he has no physical advantages, like in terms of reach, height, and strength. It's not even like he's insanely strong. I understand he cut from like the rugby league and whatnot, but it's not even like he's one hit KOing everyone. It's like he just outworks everyone, and it's crazy. So when you're around that, you're like, I can't help but be inspired. So I'm very fortunate to be in this position to be inspired by so many people, and I just hope to pass it on. And again, like the business sense, just being around with Mark, I'm like very excited just seeing him do his thing. I'm like, man, I can't wait to kind of be in a similar position where I start maybe MMA companies, helping PFL funnel into Asia and do these kind of deals, that kind of deals. So it's a very unique, I think, position to be in for someone like me with no. It's not like my parents were some venture capitalists or anything. Like my dad's retired. He worked at IBM for a couple years, and then my mom didn't even graduate 8th grade. Like
Wow.
she's not even like anyone of that status. I just remember growing up, she was always on the computer, always like reading books, something. And then next thing she had this opportunity fall into her lap, and then now she's the international distributor for See's Candies, the
Oh,
chocolate
wow.
brand. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what she
yeah.
does in
Wow.
Taiwan. And even then, she runs a very small operation. It's not like she's making millions or tons of money. There's only like 5 stores in Asia. So I just think it's a really interesting how my mom didn't come from a formal education, and she is able to accomplish like some amazing things that I look up to her a lot. And the next thing, there's that whole Mark connection, and it's not like I have this specific backing. So it's really cool to see all these things kind of happen. And with these people, the way they treat the people around them, they're just very humble, very nice, and they look to just pass on information. And I'm like, man, I am inspired by these people, and I look to do the same. That's why I'm so excited about the business talks and bringing up PFL, going to Asia, and all this stuff.
You might not be a 10-time IBJF world champion, but you're probably a good training partner, which I think there's something to be said about that as well. And it's funny, I do want to talk about the business stuff, but you just reminded me of a funny meme I saw a couple days ago where it was a picture of Alexander Volkanovski standing next to a photo of Rumble Johnson,
Oh,
saying that these guys fought in the same weight class. Just let's be
yeah.
clear here. And so, like, have anything, but on the business side, you've expressed a lot of interest in growing the sport in Taiwan and starting your own businesses. Can you share a little bit more about any of the future plans that you have in those areas and how you're going to kind of intertwine it with your career?
Yeah, so I think it's very easy to kind of navigate around that conversation because, like, the better I do in fighting, the bigger name, the more I want to say negotiations you could do with certain people and certain brands. And I think for me, it's about, well, obviously I didn't get that win, so it's kind of going back to the drawing board. How do I fix that? I'm still fighter first right now as a career. I'm just planning for when I'm done fighting, which is the next 5 years, 6 years. Um, so what are the steps I need to do? It's how do I get better as a fighter? As I get better as a fighter, you become a better teacher because you can teach these things. If you can't teach the things that you're learning, maybe you're not understanding it that well yourself. So I think it's that, continue to build my craft, win fights. As I win fights, bigger headlines, more connections that I could have, more negotiations, more not bragging rights, but just more leverage to your name that you could use for the business side of things. And then slowly from there, it'll be like a domino effect. What I think people tend to do in business is they try to gravitate towards like 5 or 6 things and of all trades, master of none, that kind of thing. And I think the issue with that is you're not going all in on one. You're just kind of putting a little bit here, a little bit there. So you're always kind of having a safety net. You refer back to the Batman movie, Dark Knight Rises, when he jumps. And how did he finally make that jump? It was without the rope. That's how he made that climb. And I think when you don't have a safety net, you kind of have this mentality of you can't make a reckless decision because you're like, man, if this is it, this is it. I can't do that. So I think for me, fighting first, and then as I continue to get better fighting and winning these fights, people start approaching me and start pulling me in these different avenues. Then I can go, hey, okay, at least I have a very good solid foundation which I built myself on, which is fighting. From there, you can start navigating, slowly, and then understanding that. So that way you're not like on your last limb, you're not going out on on the, like your shield. At least you kind of have an understanding of the industry and everything you do. I think not enough people give themselves credit and also are hard enough on themselves. It sounds very paradoxical. It might be, but I think people don't look at the wins that they have, and sometimes maybe they do too much, but then they don't look at the losses. It's a very interesting concept. I think that's what business is. It's balance. But I always explain balance to people. Balance is not being in the middle. It's constant teetering to the far left. And then when you're on the far left, the only way you could look is right. Then you go back and recorrect itself. Now that you're far right, you look to the left. So you're never in the middle looking left or right, because if you always look left or right, your attention is gone. I personally feel like you always go one way really hard, then you go the other way. That's balance. Balance is correcting itself constantly. Just like the reason why I say that is because it's just like martial arts. I started off doing jujitsu. very good at jiu-jitsu, competed over probably, 50 something times, got a bunch of gold medals. I hated getting punched in the face. So I started learning striking. And then now my skill set went all striking. And then a couple of my first pro fights got out grappled, went back to grappling, submitted some guys with some ridiculous submissions. I had a bulldog choke, which almost no one gets, and then I got
Yeah.
a necktie, which, I mean, I think there's only like, you could only name probably 10 to 20 neckties in MMA. Like, I don't think there's more than 20 submissions of all time,
I mean,
and
I couldn't even name one. The Bulldog, I know there was the Askren,
yeah,
Robbie
Askren
Lawler.
Lawler.
But
Yeah,
even that was, controversial, which
questionable,
is,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really weird because both my submissions it's like the lowest percentage submissions that I managed to get it because I reworked my grappling. So I think and then I went back to striking because I got hit a couple times, and then, so I constantly think there's like this teetering, but it's not like you spend a little time here, a little time there, and just kind of get good at both. You have to go heavy one side. My last fight, similar thing happened. I got out grappled, so now I got to go heavy back into grappling. You might see my next fight, I submit the guy, and then, the next fight I have to go work on my strike again. So martial arts, I think, is a reflection of life too, because how you handle yourself in stressful situations, or even when you don't want to go to the gym because you're sore, my body's injured, it's beaten up from like a long camp. What do? You take time off. You don't train as hard. Why don't you train as hard? Because you got to let your body recover. The only reason why you rest is so you can walk further. That's something my mom always told me. She said, you rest so you can walk further. That's it. And I'm like, man, that's good. And as a kid, when I was like 9, I always heard that, but I never listened. You know what I mean? So now it's like finally coming to it. I keep telling you guys, the PFL people at the media, I'm like, I'm a late bloomer. I'm gonna
It
age
only
like
took 10 or
mama.
20 years to soak in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you can only imagine the next few fights I'm gonna have. They should be glorious performances because, I'm still learning. So I think you asked me about business, and it's funny, I give you martial arts answers, but I think it's a reflection of both. I think they go hand in hand, no pun intended. Like, I think they're in sync with each other, and that's how I view the world. For a lot of people that are like either musicians or artists or something else, they might view their line of work and how to balance life, together, or their hobby. I think that's how they reflect, because that's their mirror. Martial arts is my mirror. I look at it and I see how I could, do certain things from a different perspective, and it translates over to life. Some people might like other sports like basketball, or they make music, and then the music, the symphony, the notes, where it takes them. I think that's how they reflect. So it's very interesting. And I just think for me, for martial arts, it just makes the most sense because that's what I gravitate towards the most. And I definitely think taking one step at a time. Although my mind right now is thinking about business, because I am going back to Taiwan. I think tomorrow. I just haven't seen family in a while, so I do want to spend a little bit of holidays with my family, and also the police over in Taiwan. A lot of the police chiefs and whatnot. They're I get along with them great. They're big fans of mine, so they want me to kind of give out like take photos with the new police that just graduated police academy. They want me to like do a little handshake thing, just greet everyone. So they were asking me to do that. I think there might be a couple seminars that people if they want me to do, but it's very interesting because I'm going back for the first time, not because of business. I usually go back for fights. This is the first time I'm going to go back, no fights. So I'm going to see some friends, and I think they have a show next year in Taiwan, January. So I think a lot of the guys are training for that, and I want to go there, boost their morale a little bit. I think I'm the first, person with a Taiwanese background to be in PFL, the first PFL bantamweight fight to have ever taken place. So I think for them, it's like, man, training with him, it's super cool. So just, show my face a little bit there and just chat it up, but eat good food. So that's kind of where my mind is at. But at the same time, I know deep down inside, it's like, PFL next year, the first show that they can have me on. I think I talked to Lauren. He was telling me something about February, March. So I still want to get ready, and I want to, showcase to everyone what my true skill set is.
Yeah, I'll sign him up. It's funny because when I was researching you before the PFL, and I had known your background with Dave, and I saw one of your WOTD fights, and you were just lighting this dude up on the feet, and I thought he was a grappler, and like there's like you weren't even trying to grapple, you were just throwing head kicks and body shots, and definitely speaks to your evolution, and really looking forward to how you bounce back after this one, because like you said, you didn't take too much damage, and it's in the learning experience. I mean, that's a big stage,
Yeah.
and they put a lot behind it. So I'm looking to see how you go after this one. I saw you at the media day. You're rocking this brand Dynasty up
Yeah.
and down, and I really liked. Are there any sponsors you're working with today that you want to give a shout out to, and I can tag out here in the posts?
Yeah. People. So with my sponsors, a lot of them, I like to. I don't ever do any of those bet posts because I'm not a bettor, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to work with sponsors that personally invest in me as much as I invest in them. So, Dynasty has been one of the few brands I've been with for over 10 years now. I think this year will be 10 years. They were
Wow.
believing in me before I even fought as an amateur. I was only competing in jiu-jitsu at the time, and they were awesome. They're amazing. I can't say enough good things about them. People know, they automatically associate that brand with me. Like they thought it's my brand. I'm like, no, no, just that's how tight we are. Um, Geology, it's a men's face wash brand. The reason why I kind of am in sync with that brand is because during COVID, um, and also because of my, I would say, my training partners know me. I'm very like clean. I've never gotten ringworm. I've never gotten staph infections. People know I'm like kind of a clean freak. Like you don't throw your dirty clothes and the same clean clothes in the same gym bag. It's kind of funny. It's like a little joke in the gym that people know. They're like, oh, he's not gonna step on the mats after he took a shower. So that's why I think that brand kind of worked out with me. And also, I don't look like a fighter, and they were kind of looking to work with athletes that don't look like athletes when they first started. So I got to give a shout out to Joey. Joey was the one that kind of handled the deal, and he was one of my sponsor management handles at the time. And then I partnered up with them, and we've worked out great. We had a couple good like some social media campaigns that worked out really well, and I think it got a couple 100,000 hits, and I was like, wow, that thing did awesome. And then Stamina Pro, it's a brand for anti-inflammatory. It's patches that you could just stick on yourself, and it's FDA registered, so it's not like just some bro science. It's actually legitimate studies that are going into it. Because I notice everyone nowadays do CBDs and all that stuff, but it's like how much of CBD is actually in the product, whereas with Stamina Pro, you could actually go on their website, look at their studies, and they actually do studies in colleges with very legitimate scientists. And the fact that they're FDA registered, I think it speaks a lot. And I think have um, they've rebranded a couple times, and every single time they do it, it's just amazing. And I recommend people checking out their product. And these are all products I use every day. It's not like they just throw trucks loads of cash of money on me, and I'm like, hey guys, do this stuff. And then Warlocker is just an athletic cup for fighters, and the reason why I like it is because it's bendy and it's not uncomfortable. I think that was the biggest thing. It's protection and comfortability in fights, and I had it in my last PFL fight, and it's great. And the guy that created it, he's actually Taiwanese, and he creates a lot of his product in Taiwan. So that's kind of how we got in touch, which is very interesting. And then I just recently signed a Celsius deal, and I've been drinking
Congrats.
Celsius for, I don't know. It's very interesting how life kind of works out this way, but um, sometimes you share your successes with people. I don't know, people get envious or jealous, but for me, I shared with my friends, and they got really excited with me. But I used to always buy massage guns, and then recently I got before my massage gun, no, before my fight, I got a little care package, and it was from Therabody, and they actually sent me like over $1,000 worth of stuff, and they're just like, hey, good luck on your upcoming fight. And I'm like, man, I used to spend like thousands of dollars on you guys, now you guys are sending me stuff. And then Celsius too, I just drink Celsius all the time, and then now I'm like, got to deal with them. So it's just really cool. It's kind of coming full circle, and I'm like, man, all the hard work slowly paying off. And then now some of my teammates that were with me on this trip, they're getting free Celsius drinks. We don't have to go buy them. It's just, it kind of like, like slowly, you're slowly starting to make it. I just got to win that fight next time, and I think everything will be icing on the cake. But as of right now, I just want to give a shout out to all those guys. They've been great.
Yeah, and as someone who works in the brand partnership side and just having looked through your content, I can tell you're doing it the right way, which is why you're working with those brands and why they're finding people like yourself. Because in the end, I'm going to say the word again, authenticity, right? If people
Yeah.
actually feel like someone's bringing an authentic connection to their community and their people, then there's so much you can do with that as a brand. So kudos to you, man. I mean, really looking
Thank you.
forward to seeing you get back in there, wishing you a safe trip out to Taiwan. And I'm actually going to have to check out the War Lockers because I'm actually in the market for a cup. And
Oh yeah, they're great.
you may have just sold one.
Yeah, I'll connect you. We could chat off the podcast, and yeah, we could definitely talk about it.
Oh, hey, I really appreciate that, man. Oh,
Yeah,
Khai, this means so much, man. I'm really looking forward. I think that a lot of people are going to get value out of this because people don't really get to see this side of the sport. They just think, oh, it's the wins, it's the losses. There's so much more that goes into it. And I appreciate you being an
absolutely.
open book for it.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys always giving me platforms. I always love chatting with new people, regardless if you're big or small. I just remember I started out with a smaller podcast too. They are the ones that gave me my first interview. So it doesn't matter who it is. I'm always interested in chatting.
I really appreciate that, man. Well, yeah, looking forward to put it out. And thanks for being here again.
Great. Thank you.